following podcast contains spoilers and rude words. We watch thing. We watch thing. Well, Wimmy Wham Wham Wazzle, and welcome back to another fun episode of that show where we watch some stuff. This week, it's B-Dizzle, as always, and I'm lucky enough to be joined by Beth for her first appearance in over 100 episodes. Longtime fans of the show might remember you, but everyone else is like, who's Beth? So let me ask you, who's Beth?
Well, I suppose in the context of this show, I'm Topher's sister, and in all other contexts in our lives, he's my brother.
It's so good to have you back on. I've been trying to get you on the show for so long.
I know.
Even before Topher ditched me.
Yep. I thought I'd come back, say hi, see if the marriage proposal I got from the last couple of times is still good for a nudge.
I am really excited for this one, though. Like I said, I've been trying to get you on for ages, and usually I like to get you on for kind of like thinky, maybe feminist movies or something. But a lot of people don't know that you are the disaster movie queen. Yeah.
Actually, I have to say in relation to this one, I'm kind of glad that there aren't many women because I prefer the fact that my kind are not associated with what we're about to discuss.
So I had no idea what this movie was other than the title, and it was Roland Emmerich. And that was enough for me to say, hey, Beth, do you want to do this movie?
Yep. And that was more than enough for me to say yes.
And then there was a small part of me the other night when I watched it that was like, why am I doing an episode on this? Nobody is going to see this movie. But you know what? Here we are, and it's going to be fun to talk about anyway.
It is, yeah.
So I am, of course, talking about Moonfall, a 2022 science fiction disaster film, co-written, directed, and produced by Roland Emmerich. It stars, this is mind-boggling to me, Halle Berry, Patrick Wilson, John Bradley, Michael Peña, Charlie Plummer, Kelly Yu, and Donald Sutherland. Get this, I don't know if you know this, it was shot on a budget of $138 to $146 million production budget, which makes it one of the most expensive indie films of all time. And so far it's made back a whopping $3 million at the box office.
Oh, good
internationally. Only made about 700,000 domestically, although apparently cinemas have been closed due to the whole snowstormy thing. But let's face it, that's not why this movie's doing poorly.
I mean, personally, I used comp tickets for it, so they also didn't make any money out of me.
Well, let's get into it then. So you're an Emmerich fan though, right?
I am. I mean, certainly speaking of like Day After Tomorrow, I could quote that movie better than probably its star Jake Gyllenhaal could quote the Taylor Swift songs that have been written about him. I love it. I could watch. I could watch and have watched that movie incessantly over years and years.
Before we move on,
yes,
are you on Taylor or Gyllenhaal's side?
Look, I know very little about it, I have to say.
Yeah, okay.
I'm one of those people who...
You're in the same boat as me then.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because I feel like I love and respect Taylor Swift even though I don't listen to any of her music, but I just kind of dig her vibe. And I have listened to the song in question.
All 10 minutes of it?
The 10-minute song. I've paid so much attention that I can't remember what it's called. I know that there's a scarf involved.
Yeah.
And that he did some pretty questionable shit and probably seems like he's a bit of a twat. So look, I'm on her side. I'm 100% on her side while not knowing a huge amount about it. I've formed a really strong opinion that's very ill-informed, but
Totally
I stand by.
And you... San Andreas is not an Emmerich film, is it? It's just another disaster movie.
Correct.
You famously think you made us watch it, but nobody else has any memory of watching that
I've made
movie.
you watch it now twice because we had to watch it a second time after you guys
Really?
insisted you'd never watched it a first time, which was
I don't
untrue.
remember watching it a second time either, I must say.
And I have to say, this movie that we're speaking about today, Moonfall, would have really benefited from The Rock on a speedboat saving them from the tides.
You know what? Let's get straight into it then. One thing I will say about the movie is I didn't hate my time with it. Mm-hmm. I had enough fun. Did you see this alone?
No, I saw it with two friends, one of whom is they're both astronomically, no pun intended, smarter than I am. One of whom did his doctorate in conspiracy theory, so that was an interesting thing, to talk to him. You absolutely should have asked him on instead of me. He was really interesting to talk about it afterwards from a kind of conspiracy theorist perspective and the kind of Samwell Tarly whatever his actual name is, the actor, and his kind of role in the movie. And the other one, the other friend I saw it with is just kind of a general, IQ through the roof, knows a lot about political systems and philosophy. So he was another interesting person to talk to about it. Yeah. So the best part of the movie for me was discussing it afterwards with them.
And here's the thing. Here's what I was going to say. I think in some ways there's an argument to be made that this film should have just dropped straight on Netflix, right?
Yeah.
That said, if I had watched this movie at home, particularly if I watched it alone, I would have hated this so much more. The best part of this movie was seeing it in a cinema on date night, laughing about it, turning to my wife and being like, what the fuck was that? Yeah, that's what made this movie fun. And I did have fun with it, I have to say.
I think I didn't have fun with it, but I think that the thing I liked most about it was knowing I was going to be able to come and talk to you about it and just talk, because I just love casting shit at things. And I knew that that's what this would be. So for me, that the anticipation of doing that almost made the movie worth it.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's talk cast then.
Sure.
Sam Tarly is an odd choice. Apparently he was recast. That was originally given to Josh Gad. And now that I know that, I'm like, okay, yeah, that tracks, because they're virtually the same man, except one is funnier.
Yeah, sure. I found that I was quite confused about what he was meant to be. He kind of had this sort of slight Simon Pegg in, circa Star Trek vibe. He's kind of like this kind of sort of funny, bumbling tech guy. But then he was also partly, I think, meant to be this sort of slight, Donald Glover in The Martian, being kind of this sort of socially awkward genius. But he didn't hit either of them. And you have to, because they paid, there's just such little character development in this movie. I do think you have to hit a trope if it's going to work. Yeah, and he just hit none of them at all. He was awful. The character was awful. I hated everything about it.
I agree. It's like the film doesn't know what that character is meant to be.
Yes.
It feels like it doesn't know how the audience is meant to feel about him either. Yep. Are we supposed to hate him? Because your inherent response to conspiracy nutters is that they suck.
Exactly right. Exactly. And especially releasing a film at a time where there's a lot of conspiracies going around about a lot of different, big and internationally affecting issues. It is interesting that the movie didn't seem to make any point about supporting the conspiracy theorists or looking to the science, or was I meant to be on his side, or was I meant to there was no one I was aligned with. They all kind of sucked.
And because at the end of the day, he is right.
He was right.
Which is weird.
Exactly.
But also, I never really understood what was happening, because he was stealing his data from NASA, right? Like, he was calling and pretending that he was a doctor to get their data.
Exactly.
Right. And I was like, okay, all right, this is odd.
Yes. And they would have known it was him calling, because we see at one point someone calling someone on the phone. It just comes up as NASA. So apparently when NASA calls you, it appears on the telephone.
Yeah. And then there's that one weird time where for some reason he pronounces it NASA. You noticed that as well? I was like, what?
Maybe in the Queen's English, that's how it's pronounced. And down here in the colonies, we're just like NASA.
But he only does it once. And then every other time he says NASA.
It's very curious.
It is strange.
But it was, because again, it was Samuel Tarly. I was like, who gives a fuck? I never paid attention to anything he did before. Why would I start now? But I do think there was kind of a maybe missed opportunity with, and this is probably because I saw it with the friend who knows a lot about these issues, but I thought, look, there has always been a long history of people talking about how the moon affects you. Yes, we're all controlled by the moon in some way. The full moon drives people crazy, werewolves, blah, 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 blah. So at some point I thought, is it going to try to kind of feed into a new conspiracy about how the moon or how the stars or the solar system or whatever affects people and controls people in some way?
Sick.
Which would have been interesting. Or was it trying to be a satire? No, because it wasn't funny or smart.
Yeah.
Was it trying to be a disaster movie? Again, I felt there wasn't enough. This is what I mean. There was no rock on a speedboat. There was no kind of like buildings being destroyed in really spectacular fashion. And there was not enough disaster, not enough smart, not enough action to fit into anything in particular.
Yeah, you know what? You're totally right. I didn't really make that connection at the time, but there is a lot of the chunk of the film spent in space.
Yes.
And to me, a disaster movie is about the Earth. It's about trying to escape. You know, like I said, I knew nothing about this film going into it, but I thought it would be about the moon falling, like a comet type thing, and people trying to escape. And instead, like 50% or more of this film is them as astronauts going to the moon, and it kind of cuts back to some characters on Earth making that escape disaster type thing, but not really.
And many of whom are entirely inconsequential. Like the mum who, you know, is sort of, you know, losing her memory, the son going to prison. Again, these things are just totally unnecessary. They're unnecessary. I felt like the storyline for the first maybe at least sort of 45 minutes or so felt very manic. There were all of these different plot lines going on, and none of them seemed to make sense. And I thought, are they all going to be grouped up together in some way at the end? No.
Manic is exactly the word I would describe. It's frantic. It's so fast paced. And this is a movie to me, and I think I've spoken about this on the show before. One of the lessons I learned about storytelling is to replace your ands with buts or therefores.
Yes.
This is a movie of ands. This is like, this happened, and then this happens, and then this happens. And none of it ties together. None of it is affecting anything else that happens in the plot. It's just throwing a bunch of shit in your face.
Yeah.
It's hectic.
Nothing felt natural. There was no natural flow to it at all. It needed a very serious edit, especially in a movie that, what was it, 130 minutes, I think? It was far too long.
Just over 2 hours, I think. Which is still, I mean, honestly, these days, that's short when you compare it to other movies that have come out this year.
Yep.
But that's a lengthy movie for what this is.
So one thing I wanted to talk to you about was the kind of aesthetic of the film. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, and if you haven't, then please don't.
Which is, honestly, if anyone's listening to this, I mean, looking at the numbers of how many people have seen it, let's say this episode, I don't know, let's be generous. Let's say this gets 10,000 downloads. 3 people will have seen it.
Sure. So if you haven't seen it, then there's a spoiler alert coming up, is that the moon, as Billy said before, I imagined it was going to be a kind of something is kind of fucked up in the normal way of the solar system. The moon has been kicked out of its orbit. It's starting to come towards Earth and it's going to fall towards us. Yeah. Oh no. What actually has happened is that the moon is a megastructure. And we get told this by someone who calls himself a doctor of megastructuralism.
Who later says he's not a doctor.
Not a real
he
doctor.
Even just made that up.
Which again, shocking. And they build a moon. This new, and try to keep it a secret. They cover it in whatever, like
moon dust,
moon rocks, and moon holes. To make it look like a real moon and not a fake moon. So it is actually not a real quote-unquote planet. It is a megastructure that is driven by this internal power source, which I think we get told is driven by harnessing dead stars or something, the energy of dead stars.
I must have missed that.
And anyway, at some point, the artificial intelligence finds the moon, fucks it all up, and that's what knocks it out of its orbit. It's going to come and kill Earth. So I was really interested in the aesthetic of the movie from that perspective, because when you go and look at when later in the movie you see all this kind of exposition, I guess, about what had happened and what the moon really is, it looks very futuristic. The aesthetic is very futuristic. And I don't know, obviously, what the kind of how it was shot and what it was shot on to make it look this way. But I feel like the movie itself also has that kind of futuristic vibe to it, which I felt was not helpful in trying to separate out what we're meant to believe is our, long ago ancestors who Donald Sutherland says makes us look like Neanderthals and, idiots rolling around in the dirt. But it makes the two worlds seem like they're the same, which again makes me less able to kind of pull apart what they're saying, which is that the people on Earth are still very much in their infancy compared to
primitive.
What exactly.
So you would have liked more kind of contrast between the look of the film on Earth and on Moon. Yeah, okay, I get that. Yeah. I thought that the production design actually wasn't terrible. Like, I thought that the look of the inside of the moon was kind of cool. And I thought a lot of the space stuff looked pretty good. Like, when you consider that this is, I know it's ridiculous to call it an indie film given like the budget and everything.
Who called it indie? What categorizes it as indie?
It was not financed or produced by a company.
Right.
Roland
okay.
Emmerich produced this himself, basically.
Okay.
So he financed it and produced this himself. So it's technically an indie film in the same way that most Mel Gibson films, like Passion of the Christ, that's an indie film for the same, I guess it depends on how you categorize it.
Sure.
But I actually thought that the look of the film was pretty solid, I gotta say.
Yeah. There were a couple of moments where I thought it came close to, at one point someone uses the term moon terror. As in, like, someone's caught the moon terrors. Yeah. And it was funny at the time, but I thought, okay, it's actually quite interesting in that there were times in which the moon did look terrifying.
Yeah.
And, I thought it could have done, it came close but not quite far enough for me in terms of turning something very beautiful into something that is dreadful and terrifying. And there were moments where I felt it, where it would start rising and you'd be like, shit, that's the moon that I've, stared at for however many years and I think is one of the most, ridiculously amazing, beautiful things I've ever seen. And now all of a sudden it's a thing of terror. But it came close to that, but not close.
I know what you mean. And here's the thing that kind of annoys me about this film is that I don't hate the general story. I think where I hate is where it ends up. I hate the megastructure part of it. That whole I think that the general premise of, as you say, the moon kind of, I don't hate that. I think that's kind of cool. Yeah. And I think some cool stuff could have been done there and just wasn't.
Yeah.
And I think you kind of nailed it before when I don't feel like the movie really knows what it wants to be. It's not a disaster movie. It's not a sci-fi, but it's very sci-fi heavy.
Yes.
You're right. There are some kind of horror elements that this could have been a straightforward horror movie. Like, you take this premise and there are a million different ways you could play it.
Absolutely.
This could be a quirky, offbeat indie rom-com about two people as the world ends when the moon is falling. There's any way you could take this. And I just don't know why it went the way it did.
Yes, I agree. And there were also moments where I just felt, I probably did laugh maybe, half a dozen times at stuff that was genuinely very silly and stupid. And those moments can be very fun and entertaining. But there was also stuff in it that I just felt was very offbeat and in almost, not in a way that was necessarily offensive, but just kind of quite tone deaf.
Yeah, like
so
what?
There was a moment, for example, where Samuel, I will never, I don't know what his name was and I don't care to know, is talking to two of the guys at NASA and he's saying to them, I almost got a job at NASA once.
Oh, that's right,
And they say, what was the job? And he says janitorial. And I know I meant to laugh, I guess, but
the world needs janitors, man.
The world needs janitors, and also we're just coming out of, still in the grips of a pandemic where people like cleaners and people who are responsible for keeping places, safe and healthy for people. Yeah, and sanitary is like one of the most fucking important and noble things you could do. And things like that, I was just like, can you fuck off with this?
I know
it's not funny, and it's actually borderline offensive.
Yeah. It'd be like making, I know that this used to be a common thing, but I feel like making fun of people who flip burgers or food delivery people. At the moment, those people are my champions.
Yeah.
As soon as lockdown started, I said to my wife, please don't let them close Uber Eats. I will end myself if they close Uber Eats.
And if nothing else, hopefully it sort of starts to, engender the sort of respect that should have always been shown to people doing whatever job they happen to be doing.
And people need to do jobs, man.
Yeah, and, and we should be bloody grateful that someone, gives me my Twister, even though KFC changed the fucking version of it that they do and I don't get them anymore.
Hey, I haven't been to KFC in so long. Is it true that they had to change their menu because there's no chicken?
I don't know, but I did see someone post something on Facebook recently that was a very earnest and hilarious complaint about not getting wicked wings.
Yeah, because apparently just, because like all truck drivers and stuff are in ISO, there's like no chicken. And they had to like, it's like, why are you even still open, KFC? Chicken is what you do.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, I just, for that, like little things like that, I thought, do we really need to still be doing this now? The other one that really stuck out to me was a joke about, quote unquote joke, about Elon Musk, where Samuel Tarly says, what would Elon do? And to me, again, it just fell very dead. I thought firstly he would monetize whatever is going on. If you think that people like him and Jeff Bezos are not going to realize that there is AI that now exists on the moon and they're not going to go and then fuck up the moon and we'll all die anyway, just go and refer to Don't Look Up if you haven't watched that yet. But I just thought Elon Musk is an interesting thing, especially because there was a scene in which sort of the tides really start to come in because, of course, rely on the moon for tides. And so the tide comes in and it carries this uber yacht with it. And they show this yacht several times and it's coming towards where he and Patrick Wilson are. And I just kept waiting for the yacht to smash into them and it doesn't. It's another one of these things, as you were saying, where it's like, the thing logically doesn't flow into the next scene. But for me, it was just kind of like, well, I suppose Elon Musk would firstly monetize it and then go on a like Twitter rant defending himself with some kind of like, I don't know, like eco-fascist faux argument that makes people feel like his movements were valid. But again, I was like, you're also speaking from a scientific conspiracy theorist. Yeah. Trying to align yourself with someone with whom it's a very bizarre marriage of ideas. That's it.
I think to me, it's moments like that where you can feel the writing. And that's where I know that this film was not written with love behind it. This was just, to me, it's funny. This movie felt to me like you had fed all of Roland Emmerich's movies into a bot and gotten a bot to write a Roland Emmerich movie. And that's what this felt like, because it's just a mishmash of all this crap.
Yes.
And you can feel that in lines like that, where it's like, Roland Emmerich clearly thought to himself, okay, this guy needs to reference a science guy. Who's a science guy that everybody knows?
Yes.
Elon Musk.
Yes.
And it's like, no, think about the character.
Yes.
Who would the character actually be, like
exactly.
Even if you need someone popular and like, what would Carl Sagan do or something, like what would Bill Nye do even would be a better line,
Yes.
Like,
but very weird. One of the friends I saw it with said he felt like it was the kind of dialogue that was written in an improv session and not written, just spoken, where people are like, I say this and then you say that and then I say this. But no one goes and retreads the steps and figure out if the entire thing actually fucking makes sense or is the way people actually speak.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Oh, this was a bad movie.
Can we talk about the actors then? Because this movie does feature one of the 5 most handsome men on the face of the earth, Patrick Wilson.
Oh, what did we say?
Oh, don't you go slamming Wilsey. I love Patrick Wilson so much. And not only do I think he is fucking gorgeous, just quietly, like, I think he's a fantastic actor. Like, if you look at some of his, like, Little Children, I don't know if you've seen Hard Candy. You're one of those people that I would both recommend to watch Hard Candy and also to never watch Hard Candy.
Interesting.
He is fucking fantastic in that film.
Yeah.
And I think it feels like him and Halle Berry are not just phoning this film in. It's like they're text messaging this film in. Like they are so not present in this film.
Yeah.
And it's really sad because they're both pretty high caliber actors.
Yeah. It felt quite, one of the friends I saw it with said afterwards he never noticed Halle Berry smile throughout the whole movie. Now that obviously is an interesting thing because
as a man, should he be telling her to smile?
I mean, he was the first person to then say it. Now, of course, women should always smile much more. But he said he almost didn't recognize her because it was such a departure. I mean, if you eliminate something sort of like Monsters Ball and stuff, it's not normal. Well, we haven't typically seen her in roles where she's very grim-faced for the entire film. And part of it was, I think that goes to the problem for me that none of them seem to actually be having fun. Like if you watch a movie like Armageddon, it's ridiculous, they're all in on the joke. But in this, they seem to be thinking it was a real film and it's not. It's just a pile of shit.
And that's how this movie should be treated. And I agree with you. I would enjoy it so much more if a movie like this needs that nod to the camera, that cheeky, like, oh, look how fucking shit this is. You know, like any Fast and Furious film. When they drive
Except
a car.
for the first one, which is genuinely a classic.
When they drive a car out of a skyscraper into another skyscraper.
And then out of that skyscraper and into another skyscraper.
They don't treat that like a serious dramatic moment. Like, you're never at any point in those films meant to worry about those characters.
That's exactly right.
And like, I didn't worry about these characters, but I feel like the film wanted me to, and I don't know why, because it didn't give me enough to care about any of them.
Yes. I not only thought they would all die at the end, I desperately hoped that they did. What did you... I was listening to it throughout thinking, I wonder if Billy noticed the score, because for me it was very predictable and very forgettable.
Forgettable is the absolute word. I thought that it served its purpose. Like, I don't think at any point it complemented what was happening on screen, and that's fine. What was happening on screen was already so bland that I didn't expect the score to lift it immensely. I wouldn't remember it for sure.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot about this film that I won't remember.
A lot that I'll be trying to forget.
What the fuck was Donald Sutherland doing in this film for one scene?
I really don't know. And again, he was one of those people where, firstly, what are you doing, Donald? And secondly, he was again one of those characters that could just be written out entirely and it would change nothing.
Nothing at all.
Absolutely nothing would be affected about the storyline.
I mean, he basically comes on just to say that NASA knew about it the whole time? Is that my memory? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But again, she could have just read it on the the USB drive that she was looking at the time. So he didn't need to be there. Yeah. So to me, basically the film was just too long, too shit. and I was left at the end thinking, where are the gay aliens? Because there is a moment in Samuel Tarly's room or whatever where you see all his sort of stickers where, very like subtle exposition about the fact that he's a kind of,
nut job.
He's a nut job. Exactly right. Who apparently, though, was entirely bang on the money.
Yeah, the whole time. Exactly. Which is crazy to me. Like, even if he's a little bit right, why did he have to be all the way right? And at the end of the film, he is literally the hero.
Yes.
He sacrifices himself to save the human race.
Yes.
And it's a very strange moment for me.
Very strange.
I'm not saying that conspiracy theorists are bad people or that they shouldn't be. It's just a really interesting move.
Yeah, it was left entirely open as to what I was meant to think about conspiracies, the moon, and Samuel Tarly.
Yeah, and it's like the film, like you were saying before. It's like they'll say a line of dialogue, and it's almost like they forgot what they said 10 minutes ago. Because it's like at one point he's talking to Patrick Wilson about you always believed in me and stuff. It's like, no, he didn't. He told you to fuck off when you first found it.
Literally thrown out by security.
Yeah. And he came to you only after he knew that you were right. He didn't give a fuck about you. You're not friends.
It's a deeply flawed film. And I really at the end I wanted the payoff of the gay aliens, which may have made one extra point in what I'm going to tell you early on is going to be a pretty low score because one of his stickers has a reference to gay aliens, and I was like, oh, yes, this is the only redemptive arc this film could have if they arrive on the moon and it's just like a massive queer colony.
Yeah.
Fucking great. I would be here for that. But again, no, just white lights and, I don't know, moving arcs.
I don't think you've said enough about Patrick Wilson. You agree with me that he's one of the most handsome men on the planet, right? I mean, he would make my list. Like how you're like he'd probably be the only male that would make my list.
Oh, no, that is untrue because one of
Affleck.
one of the previews I saw going into the movie was something featuring Carrie Elwes.
Oh, yeah, I saw the same trailer and I meant to talk to you about that because I fucking love Carrie Elwes.
I know you do, buddy. Look, Patrick Wilson probably not. He's fine. I've never really thought about it.
That's insane.
He's not really my vibe. He's too attractive.
Oh, obvious beauty is the
That's
worst.
the worst.
So how are you scoring this then, out of 10?
Look, I was hoping for a 3 out of 10, which would have been the gay alien bump. We didn't get there, so I'm going for a generous 2.
I have a 3. Like I said, I had fun with this film, and it's probably just because it was date night. You know,
Yeah.
I had a couple of dark ales before we went in.
Yeah.
Like, I had plenty of fun. I had my popcorn, had my Ben and Jerry's.
You were happy, mate.
I was totally happy. Would I see it again? Yeah.
Oh, really?
I'm not going to lie to you. Yeah, if this was showing in the fancy cinema at like a 1 p.m. session and I was able to say I had an appointment, like a doctor's appointment, and sneak out of work, and this was the only thing showing, I'd go see it. 100% I would. I'm not going to lie to you.
I would rather do unpaid work than see it again.
I had enough fun with it for sure. I'm a 3. I'm not saying it's going to win any awards.
I just felt like it offended me as a cinema goer. It offended me as a human person. And it offended me as someone who has finite time on Earth.
Do you think that part of it is that you're starting to get too old for disaster movies? Like, do you think that that's part of it? I'm not calling you old. I'm saying, like, do you think that we as an audience have outgrown them? Because I watched this movie, and for the first half hour, I was like, this would have killed in the 90s. Like, this exact movie made in the 90s would have been better received than what this movie is today.
I think
audience have just outgrown this genre to a certain extent.
I think the opposite for me, where I was desperate for it to be a disaster movie because I just love a disaster film.
Yeah.
And I love those big disaster sets. I mean, even when you watch something back like Twister, which is probably a bit of a hybrid disaster, really.
Yeah, that's true. That's another one that's, yeah.
Yeah, it still has enough, there are enough intersections of disaster throughout the movie to kind of anchor it a bit in that genre, but it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be beaten over the head with it.
Yeah.
Or you can go to something that's very full on, like Day After Tomorrow, for example.
2012.
Where it's very full on. And even 2012 was not a good film. So for me, like, okay, I'm fine. I don't mind if it's going to have a bit of kind of drama mixed in, like something like Twister, and still kind of hit a couple of, disaster, whatever.
Tropes.
Or just to go full-fledged into disaster, San Andreas, Day After Tomorrow style. But it didn't do either of those things. And so for me, I was desperate to be a full-on disaster movie, and either I am too old or it just genuinely didn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Can we not let it be another 115 episodes before you come back?
I will try and come back sooner than that. The chocolate here is very good.
It is. And like you hear all the time anyway.
That's true.
You know what? Next time we could do a throwback. Next time you could pick a movie for us to watch here and then record straight after.
Ooh. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
And we'll make Noose join us on mic too, instead of just sitting listening to us eating chocolate.
Love it.
Yes, now you can. Well, actually, no, wait. We're nearly done.
You suck.
Next week, I will be joined by a fantastic friend of the show, Julio from the Contrarians, talking about, to make up for this crap film, we'll be looking at something a bit artsier with Wes Anderson's new The French Dispatch. So that'll be a bit of fun. And in the meantime, if you want to get in touch with me, you can do that at wewatchedathing.com or wewatchedathing@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all under the handle @wewatchedathing. If you want to help support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/wewatchedathing, and I'll catch you next week.
Watch a movie.
Now you can open the chocolate.